This video discussion in our clinical toxicology series is about dietary supplements, more or less corresponding to Chapter 43 in Goldfrank's Toxicologic Emergencies. And you'll hear me read through these objectives when the rest of the video starts. This is another topic for which I'm redeploying material I've previously created for other groups of learners. In this case, it's from a presentation created for medical students in their pharmacology course. I make several references in this presentation to a chapter in Katzung's Basic and Clinical Pharmacology. There isn't 100% overlap between that chapter and the corresponding reading assignment in Goldfrank's textbook, but I hadn't been planning on exactly following that chapter's format anyway. The relevant key points I wanted to make are all here, so we're good to go.
This pharmacology presentation is about herbs and dietary supplements, and the content corresponds primarily to Chapter 64 of the Katzung textbook. And here are the learning objectives, taken directly from the Katzung review book. After studying the material related to the book chapter and this video, you should be able to contrast the U.S. regulations related to dietary supplements to those for therapeutic drugs with regard to proof of efficacy and safety, be able to list many of the widely used botanical, which is to say herbal, products, and describe their purported medical uses, adverse effects, and potential drug interactions, and to be able to do the same thing for several other non-botanical, purified nutritional supplements. Now we're getting back to the concept of pharmaconosia, the study of medicines from natural sources, which I briefly introduced you to earlier in the course. As you can see from the list here on this slide, many of the drugs that we can use therapeutically come from plant origins, including drugs like atropine, colchicine, morphine, quinine, etc., etc. And there are other natural sources of drugs too, like from fungi or bacteria, and a few more of those examples are also shown here. Now, there are many people who would equate a substance that has a natural origin with necessarily being safe. It's the synthetic drugs, they'd say, which are harsh chemicals that can be dangerous, whereas Mother Nature's provided us with a whole variety of healing herbs, and conventional Western medicine remains largely ignorant of this bounty to its detriment. The increasing popularity of such herbal therapies has resulted in increasing political pressures. Even within Western medicine over the past few decades, there's been a shift towards including the patient more and more in the medical decision-making process. And this move towards more personal control by the medical consumer has resulted in a few things. Starting in the 1990s, we first saw direct-to-consumer prescription drug advertising in the United States. You can hardly turn on the TV or read a magazine now without seeing drug ads, but that has not been the traditional norm, and you don't find it in most other countries either. Since more and more people were using various herbal therapies, which had been available over the counter since they were not drugs per se, it seemed that they might start getting regulated by the FDA. And in the late 90s, though, a bill was passed to address this issue. Now, you'll recall that substances sold as drugs need to undergo an approval process by the FDA, and this involves extensive testing even before the drug is tried in humans. And this is followed by phase 1, 2, and 3 clinical trials with the goal of assessing the drug's safety and efficacy before allowing the drug to be marketed. Since there was such great popularity of herbal medications and dietary supplements in the late 20th century, some lawmakers wanted to ensure continued consumer access to these substances by creating legislation that bypasses the normal FDA processes of drug approval. And this was called the DSHEA, or Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act of 1994 ensured that herbs and other so-called dietary supplements would remain available over the counter since they could not be classified as drugs. Now, if they are not drugs, then they cannot make drug claims, which leads to the common disclaimer you see in these advertisements where it says in small print that the product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Because those are the properties of drugs, and since the product is technically not a drug, it can't be sold for those purposes. Instead, dietary supplements will be regulated more like foods than as drugs. If someone's going to sell a food, they're not required to provide proof of safety or efficacy. It's just assumed, for example, that your hot dogs will be wholesome and effective in reducing hunger. Of course, your product should not be contaminated or poisonous, but you don't have to prove that prior to marketing. Instead, it's the authorities that are required to show proof if your product is dangerous for it to be removed from the market. Similarly, manufacturers of dietary supplements do not have to show proof of efficacy, which is convenient because you can't really claim that they have any drug effects even if they were effective. You can sell your dietary supplement with impunity, but you just have to kind of remain vague about what it is that it is supposed to do. Well, in my opinion, this takes medical consumer self-determination too far. Really, who needs to get a medical degree? Who needs governmental regulations and oversight if each consumer can decide what is truly best for themselves? And they're making these decisions based upon what? A gut feeling, based upon what they've read on the internet. So you end up seeing some books like this down here entitled Be Your Own Doctor, with doctor in quotes. And then check out that author's degree in MH, a master herbalist, something that you can apparently get from a home study course. So why is it again that we all went to medical school? And I'm going to have to apologize here somewhat for being paternalistic, but I believe that the knowledge needed to rationally evaluate the scientific and medical evidence is beyond the capabilities of the typical layperson. This is why medical school and other professional schools exist. There's a body of knowledge and a way of thinking about it, i.e. the scientific method, that works. And even fully trained physicians and scientists can sometimes have difficulty correctly interpreting the information. So why should we think that everybody knows best for themselves? Each person is allowed their own opinion, but not necessarily their own reality. Now, the projected aura regarding herbs and dietary supplements that is out there is one of natural beauty, like this butterfly landing upon a purple coneflower. The application of some ancient herbal knowledge and a sense of freshness and vibrancy through ideas like healing trauma through art and homotoxicology for brain tumors. So, by the way, homotoxicology is the pseudoscience stating that diseases are due to toxins building up in the body. However, what I see being promulgated reminds me a lot more of medievalism, snake oil salesman, and witch doctor type medicine. That being said, just because it's herbal does not necessarily mean that it's bunk. For instance, in Germany they have the E-Commission, which is an advisory board to their equivalent of the FDA. And this E-Commission creates monographs about herbal medicine safety and efficacy that are true science. Unfortunately, much of the information that is out there about herbs isn't scientifically based, and many consumers don't know how to tell the difference. So why are we learning about herbs? Well, I can think of two good reasons. First, some of your patients will be using complementary and alternative therapies, whether you agree with those practices or not. So it's important to be aware of the potential beneficial and adverse effects and drug interactions that may occur. And second, it's quite possible to get 1 or 2 questions related to herbs and dietary supplements on the NBME pharmacology exam or the USMLE Step 1. So this slide is a list of the herbs and dietary supplements that we're going to be reviewing in some further detail. This is clearly an incomplete list of all the herbs that are out there, but it certainly hits the high points among those agents that are most commonly used and therefore most likely you're going to be examined on. Echinacea purpurea is the purple coneflower, and echinacea has the reputed indications to treat common viral upper respiratory tract infections, which, if true, would be very helpful since patients often seek medical attention for the common cold and there's not much we can do about it with prescription drugs. Many echinacea products play up this purported immunologic effects. And this product, for instance, says that it supports immune function followed by an asterisk, and I'm not quite sure exactly where the asterisk goes. So that claim of supporting immune function is really kind of vague, so vague that it's not an actual drug claim, but many consumers won't necessarily know the difference. So here's a part of a table from the Kaplan Review book, and it shows some potential medicinal uses and possible mechanisms, and echinacea might increase the level of some interleukins and of tumor necrosis factor, but the evidence that it really helps to treat the common cold is pretty weak. Mahuang is the Chinese name for the herb ephedra. The scientific name for this plant, seen here in a Mongolian stamp, is Ephedra sinica, where sinica means Chinese. Mahuang is used as part of traditional Chinese medicine, and it's used to treat respiratory tract congestion and asthma, and modern preparations of ephedra are touted for energy and for weight loss. And ephedra actually works because the active ingredient is known to be ephedrine, which is also used in a more purified form in conventional Western medicine as a decongestant and a stimulant. Ephedrine is a sympathomimetic drug, therefore causing effects similar to the endogenous catecholamines and to amphetamine or cocaine. Thus, it has a predictable side effects and toxicity profile, such as causing tachycardia, hypertension, palpitations, chest pain, myocardial infarction, anxiety, seizures, and stroke. And ephedra is the only herbal supplement to date that has been banned in the US, and this occurred after a spate of some highly publicized deaths of athletes who were using ephedra as a performance-enhancing supplement. Now, despite that, ephedra is still frequently sold, and here's an example right here of one of those products, Black Widow Extreme Energizer. On to garlic. Garlic's scientific name is Allium sativum, where sativum basically means tasty. And right here is the structure of allicin, the chemical that gives garlic its punch. Garlic is sometimes touted to treat hyperlipidemia, and it's possible that it might inhibit HMG-CoA reductase, which is the same mechanism as the statins. Garlic also appears to have some antiplatelet effect, so it could increase the risk of bleeding and have an adverse interaction with some anticoagulant drugs. Ginkgo biloba is touted to improve memory. Ginkgo has been found to affect the blood's rheologic properties, that is, it appears to improve blood flow, which would make it helpful in treating, say, intermittent claudication, a condition where there's limited blood flow to the extremities. But how improved brain blood flow is supposed to improve memory or improve Alzheimer's disease is a bit of a stretch. As with garlic, there is the possibility of increased bleeding complications and drug interactions with anticoagulants. Ginseng is another herb long used within traditional Chinese medicine. The scientific name for ginseng is Panax ginseng, where Panax means all healing. And this allows me to tell you about Suchard's rule. If you see anything out there with 4 or more unrelated indications, it's probably not good for any of them. Ginseng is touted to improve mental and physical performance, but the evidence is pretty weak and there's no known described mechanism of action. Some potential side effects include insomnia, hypertension, breast pain, mastalgia, and vaginal bleeding. Milk thistle is a plant with the scientific name Silybum marianum, and a standard extract from this plant is called silymarin. Silymarin is often sold as a liver tonic, and then they apply some vague hint that it will help to cleanse the liver or maintain liver health or protect liver function. It's not really clear that silymarin does anything to augment a healthy liver, but the active ingredient, known as silibinin, is used to treat hepatotoxicity from poisonous mushrooms. St. John's wort is Hypericum perforatum. This is a plant that flowers around June 24th, which is St. John's Day, hence St. John's wort. St. John's wort is, or at least was, one of the most commonly used herbal supplements, and it is used as an antidepressant. And there's some good evidence that it's effective in mild to moderate depression, and the apparent mechanism of hypericin, an active component, is that it affects serotonergic neurotransmission through reuptake inhibition. And one of the common side effects encountered with St. John's wort is photosensitivity, so you can go out in the sun and very easily get a sunburn. A very important thing to know about St. John's wort is its potential for serious drug interactions. St. John's wort has been implicated in some cases of serotonin syndrome when it's used along with other proserotonergic drugs. But more importantly, St. John's wort induces cytochrome P450 enzymes. And this will end up reducing the levels of the other drugs involved in the interaction. And this has even resulted in some cases of organ transplant rejection when the patient, in addition to their anti-rejection meds, took St. John's wort because they were feeling a little bit depressed about the transplant, and they ended up rejecting their organ. Saw palmetto is touted for symptoms associated with benign prostatic hypertrophy. Of course, herbal supplements can't say that they actually treat BPH, so the labels instead say something like supports a healthy prostate or supports prostate function. The proposed mechanism of action is through inhibition of 5-alpha reductase, which is the same mechanism as for finasteride, a drug which is FDA approved for treating BPH. Coenzyme Q10 is also known as ubiquinone, so named because it is ubiquitous, meaning that it's found everywhere. Ubiquinone, as you will recall, is an electron-carrying cofactor in the mitochondrial electron transport chain. Now, it's touted for multiple indications, including for ischemic heart disease, Parkinson's, hypertension, migraine headaches, and so you might want to apply Suchard's rule right here. Or as this label says, it is to support energy production. Now, that at least makes a little bit of sense knowing its intracellular role, but it's still pretty vague. Glucosamine is an amino sugar precursor to the glycosaminoglycans found in some connective tissue. Since it's a component of the connective tissue that's found in joints, it is touted to help with the pain associated with osteoarthritis, a joint disease. Glucosamine is often combined with chondroitin, yet another component of connective tissue, as shown over here in this product. Melatonin is touted to help with jet lag and some other sleep-associated disorders. Melatonin is a naturally produced hormone that is associated with the sleep cycle, so this does make some sense. And here in melatonin structure, this portion right there is actually equal to serotonin, so you can see it's a modified serotonin-derived hormone. Some side effects include drowsiness, which would seem to me to be the desired therapeutic effect from melatonin. As well, it can cause some reproductive interference since it can lower luteinizing hormone and prolactin levels. DHEA is dehydroepiandrosterone, which is a precursor to some androgenic steroid hormones. DHEA has multiple indications, many of which appear unrelated to the known mechanisms of action of androgenic steroid hormones. Most of the side effects that are seen are related to sex steroid function, such as the possibility of androgenization in females, because now they have more androgens around, and also the possibility of feminization in males, because the excess androgens can be aromatized into estrogens. Okay, so now I've finished going over the individual herbs and dietary supplements, and I wanted to switch gears to talk about homeopathy, mostly to distinguish it from herbal medicine, with which it is often confused. So homeopathy is a pseudoscience that was invented in the late 1700s, and it's based upon the doctrine that like cures like, and that you can stimulate the body to fight off disease by exposing it to small amounts of that disease. Now, that's the same general idea behind vaccination, with the major exception that vaccination is real and homeopathy is not. So to give you an example of how homeopathy is alleged to work, let's conduct a thought experiment and make a homeopathic remedy. So the plant shown here, Cephalus ipecacuana, is a natural source of ipecac, which can be used to induce vomiting since it irritates the gastric mucosa peripherally and it stimulates the medullary chemoreceptor trigger zone centrally. If we gave somebody a small enough dose of ipecac that it won't induce vomiting, their body could build up a resistance to nausea and vomiting, right? So if we grind up some ipecac root, we can't just give that as a treatment to cure nausea, because that would just make things worse. So let's dilute that preparation 1 to 10 with water and shake it up. And the process of shaking, that step is called succussion, and it's a real important part of the theory of homeopathy. So now we dilute it 1 to 10 again and shake it again and dilute it again and again. And according to homeopathy, each successive step of dilution and succussion increases the potency as the water gets imbued with a molecular memory of the active ingredient. So each dilution by a factor of 10 gets represented by the Roman numeral X for 10. Alternately, you can dilute by a factor of 100, which is represented by the Roman numeral C for 100. And homeopathic remedies that are sold are often 10x, 10 serial dilutions by a factor of 10, or 24x or 30x, or sometimes even 30C. Now, compare this to Avogadro's number, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd, and you can see that most homeopathic products contain exactly 0 molecules of the original substance. Whereas the homeopath would argue that the preparations that have the higher X value or C value, and therefore have even less chance of having 1 molecule of the active ingredient, are the more potent. Yes, it is that weird. Basically then, homeopathic remedies are placebo pills. There's no physical, chemical, or biological way that homeopathy can be effective except as a placebo treatment. But they shouldn't be directly harmful by the same reasoning. A potential harm of homeopathy, therefore, is that the patient avoids known effective therapies. Now, the placebo effect is real, and if the patient has a self-limited illness or one that's benign or naturally waxes and wanes, you can easily have the appearance of successful therapy, and this is why homeopathy persists. Additionally, there are consumers who are looking for natural herbal therapies who see that the homeopathic remedies list various herbal products on their labels, and I wonder what they would think about this if they knew that they were getting 0 molecules of the herbs they thought they were looking for. So finishing up here on homeopathy, I'd like to show you this 2.5-minute video from the British comedy series That Mitchell and Webb Look. There are a few minor transatlantic cultural differences here that I wanted to explain. A&E means accident and emergency in the UK, which we would just call the emergency department. RTA means road traffic accident, and this abbreviation can sometimes be used in the US, but around here we usually say MVC, standing for motor vehicle collision. They're going to mention a Ford Mondeo, and that is a mid-sized or large family car that we don't have here in the US, and a biro is what the British call a ballpoint pen, named after the inventor of the ballpoint pen, Laszlo Biro.
What have we got?
RTA, broken arm, suspected internal injuries, severe contusions to the head.
I'm going to need to move fast. Put me a solution of arnica montana. Stat.
Strength?
1 part in a million.
I'm sure it looks serious.
You're right. We need to strengthen one of those. 1 part in 10 million.
On it, doctor.
Here you go, tricky one.
Nothing we can't handle. Get me some wolfsbane, also known as monk's hood, in here. And a whole tray of flower remedies.
Whoa, your chakras are fading. You're gonna need some crystals.
Nurse, fetch me some purple tinted quartz. Damn it, you're right. Make that aquamarine quartz.
Good call.
Okay, he's stabilizing. Now, does anybody know what sort of car hit him?
Blue Ford Mondeo, apparently.
Right, get me a bit of Blue Ford Mondeo, put it in water, shake it, dilute it, shake it again, dilute it again, do some more shaking, dilute it some more, and then put 3 drops on his tongue. If that doesn't cure him, I don't know what will.
You should have a look at this, Simon.
What is it?
Dear, this poor chap's got long to live.
Why not?
His lifeline, very short. But his horoscope's not too clever either. Sagittarius. Brace yourself for a surprise. Things are about to change for you.
Certainly are, unless... Wait.
What?
We could try drawing a bit more lifeline on with biro.
It'll never work.
You got a better idea? Let's see what happens. Time of death, 3:34. Ish.
Tough day, eh?
I just can't stand losing them.
It happens.
I don't know. Sometimes I think a trace solution of deadly nightshade or a statistically negligible quantity of arsenic just isn't enough.
That's crazy talk, Simon. Okay, so you kill the odd patient with cancer or heart disease, or bronchitis, flu, chickenpox, or measles. But when someone comes in with a vague sense of unease, or a touch of the nerves, or even just more money than sense, you'll be there for them. A bottle of basically just water in one hand, and a huge invoice in the other.
I suppose you're right.
Now, another drink.
I need one.
Excuse me. 2 more homeopathic lagers, please.
Whoa, that's strong stuff.
Finally, here's a table from Katzung that summarizes the intended uses of the most likely herbs and dietary supplements that you might be asked about. If you knew just this table, I'd say that you'd know at least half to 2/3 of what you're expected to know on this topic. That's all. Good luck in your studies.